Hello guys, and we are back with a deck tech coming from the currently ongoing Pro Tour Outlaws of Standard Junction. So the format is limited OTJ and standard. So we see here a deck that has recently just hours ago announced as a top 8 finisher with the pilot, of course, the previous also previous Pro Tour champion Yuta Takahashi, and a very well-known and excellent player from Japan. So he's piloting Azorius Control, which we know already is one of the top-tier metagame decks in the format, in the standard format. And we're going to take a look of his build. What was the new cards added from OTG that he was able to consume this list to be able to reach the top 8 finish. And to take note that they will still have the playoffs run down this third day of the Pro Tour. That is in local time about 2 a.m. tomorrow here in Philippines local time. But nevertheless, if you are just going with the US time, it's probably just a morning there at your side. And just take on the twitch.com/magic for the coverage of this Pro Tour, or you can also check their page for daily MTGs. They're posting also the coverage. I think it is also under mtgmelee.com. You can check those. So again, let's take a look at this build. We have 28 lands, very proficient in having the most lands, probably a correct number of lands for this kind of deck. It has 23 instants, 2 enchantments with the Temporary Lockdown, 3 sorceries, and the Lone Planeswalker in the deck. That's 4 copies of the Wandering Emperor. So what really a typical blue-white control does in this kind of matchup is just doing its turn to counter all, or not really counter all, but answer all of the threats from that of your opponent. And they do make sure that each of those effects would also have them gain card advantage and board advantage. One example here is the Wandering Emperor, as she can produce an army of 2/2 white samurai creature tokens with vigilance, as well as also do some spot removal in the terms of exiling top creature and gaining 2 life, and also having the counters added to a creature and having them first strike, which is basically having a good combat advantage. And so what the deck is particularly going with is that it's just going to go with having all of these effects by making sure that you won't really progress your board advantage or card advantage and deal enough damage to zero out your opponent. So let's take a look at the first of the mass removal cards. So we have 2 copies of Temporary Lockdown. The card has become popular because of the Boros Convoke deck that has probably had swarmed the metagame early on when the release of March of the Machines, and it has been already got a few upgrades from Lost Caverns of Ixalan with the Warden, and recently the Novice Inspector from Murders at Karumanor has practically made the deck more consistent. And so Temporary Lockdown is your way to somewhat answer those effects by exiling these non-permanents, mana value 2 or less, up until the lockdown is back or leaves the battlefield. So with that kind of setup, a turn 3 mass removal would already be somewhat a back-breaking effect for this kind of matchups. It also covers the decks such as Mono Red. We have also White Winnie, and even the Rakdos Sacrifice decks is already covered because most of their cards are pretty much with the mana value requirement of 2 or less to be able to be exiled by the lockdown. So next also is the mass removal of Sunfall. What this card would also do is that it will primarily bypass the indestructible effects or cannot be destroyed effects because they would exile all creatures. And the bonus is that you can also incubate a Phyrexian token or a Phyrexian egg token, wherein the number of counters is added equal to the exiled number of creatures. So in a way, you can exile your opponent's creatures. At the same time, you get a bonus threat in the token that can also attack up your opponent once they have no follow-up or any board situation whatsoever. Now for your instance, of course, it is consist of counter spells and card draw effects, of course, spot removals in the form of March of Otherworldly Light, which can also deal with the annoyingly artifacts or enchantments. For instance, if your opponents would have Wailing Announcement as their source of threats, you can just use March to exile it. And we have also a copy of Get Lost from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, which is the same function of destroying enchantments, but it can also deal with annoying planeswalkers at the cost of just having your opponent create these map tokens, which most of the time would not be really relevant if you get to again to follow up with the sweep effects such as Sunfall. Now for the other counter spells, of course, we have No More Lies. Is that the new card that was added in this deck, which is quietly a versatile card also, is the 4 Obs of 3 Tips Ahead. So functionally, it can just be cast for 3 with the free mana to counter target spell. It can also be used to create a token that's copy of target artifact or creature you control, and can also have you to draw 2 cards and discard a card. So in any way, at 3 mana cost, it can just have to be a counter spell. But with added 2 mana for the spree, you can counter and then draw 2 cards and then discard a card. Pretty much a good way to have card advantage while also dealing with your opponent's best spell at that time. And only 2 cards was also added, which is new card from OTJ, is 2 copies of Phantom Interference. This is an instant that also acts as a counter spell because it can also pay 1 to counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and then you can also create a 2/2 white spirit creature token with flying, which is also an added threat in the mid game and late game. And last but not least are your card draws. Of course, we have Deduce, which is still considered here in this deck. You can still create clue tokens and then draw a card. And of course, Memory Deluge, which can dig up 2 cards, paying on the mana cost added for the as you cast the spells. For the first time, you can get to look at the top 4 cards, and then for the flashback effect, you can get to look at the top 7 cards and choose 2 cards among them and put it in your hand. So basically, a very good way to dig up your best creatures. You can also dig up for your Emperor and then make a board advantage once you have cleared out your opponent's threats. Now for the rundown of your lands, you can see here that we have a lot of ways of dealing with non-basics or pretty much any non-basic land your opponents might have. So few notables on that is the copies of Cavern of Souls, which is basically somewhat problematic for that kind of matchup because of this deck that needs to counter those spells. So uncounterable creatures would really be nuisance for that situation, and so you need Field of Ruin to make sure that you can destroy those Cavern of Souls and have them replace them with a basic land card. So Field of Ruin is added, and also a copy of Demolition Field with somewhat slightly different effect, but still the main function of destroying lands would be really relevant. And also this is added, the Sunken Citadel is only 1 copy because you can also have to do a mana fix. At the same time, you can pay 2 to add the 2 mana of the chosen color to spend on activated abilities of land sources. For instance, you can use it to activate Restless Anchorage ability to become a creature. Also use that mana to do the Field of Ruin effect to destroy a Cavern of Souls, a manland, or any other relevant non-basics. As for the rest of the cards here, we're just having a few of the mana fix, of course, Darker Waste, Deserter Beach, also 4 copies, a few of the channel lands, Otawara and Iganju, and also a mana and creature source with 2 copies of Mirex, that can also produce an army of Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens in the late game. Of course, Sikram Coast, and of course the mana fix with the manland Restless Anchorage of 4 copies in the deck. Now again, the notable Planeswalker in the deck is of course the Wandering Emperor, which we make sure that you can still have this one resolve and do create a board advantage on its own. Of course, with the activation, you can still have enough mana to untap mana to do your other effects of controlling the board, which is of course your main strategy of this kind of deck. Now Yuta has these some variants of sideboard cards as he added in this one. So let's take a look. We have 2 copies of Destroy Evil. It's just a few instances of having to deal with maybe with the Esper mid-range deck. So you can kill off Shodred, and you can kill off Raffin, and you can kill off the Virtue and the Wedding Announcement. And we also have copies of Negate, which is for the matchups against maybe for the Mirror or other mid-range decks that relies on non-creature spells like Planeswalkers to deal board advantage. And also we have a copy of the Flickry Silex, which is having also this effect to destroy each non-permanent equal to the number of oil counters on Silex. So also if the long game has Papen, you can use this ability, the second ability, to remove 10 oil counters from permanents you control and sacrifice the Silex. It can deal 10 damage to any target. So in a way, it can also have to be a win condition in some unpeculiar scenarios. And of course, a license here with the matchup against the Temur. We know that Temur Manlands or the Temur control decks has ways to generate advantage from graveyards, and so having a license to make sure that your recursion ability would be stopped by this spell or artifact. And then we have additional copies of Lockdown. That's 2 in the main deck and additional 2 in the sideboard for aggro matchups. We have 3 copies of the Tidebinder. In any instance that would need a utility creature that can also act as a threat, is that you would have this one sideboarded against those expected matchups. And of course, a copy of a Bonebringer Valkyrie that can also become having the effect of a backup. If it gets to back up its own, then it would still have the ability of flying first strike and lifelink, and also a good threat on its own. And of course, a copy of the the Hullbreaker Horror, which is also very good against mirror match, because this spell can be countered perfectly, and then casting spells would have you to return target spell you don't control or return target non-permanent to its owner's hand. So untapping with the Hullbreaker Horror, basically game over for most of these matchups, especially against other mid-range and mirror blue-white control decks. And let's check our mana curve. It's especially good with 2.53. It can work well already with 2 and 3 mana costs, but as more of these lands, we have 28 lands. We make sure that land drops aren't missed, and they are very also important to get you a good card advantage. Having your open mana for counter spells while also drawing some of your cards or digging through your deck. And card distribution, we have mostly white with 27, blue is 22, but the producers are somewhat even each of the blue-white effects. As you can see here, we have very much a good fix of blue and white to make sure that we don't really have any mana screw in this deck. And our tokens here, we have 7. Clue, Copy, Incubator. This is Incubator that can flip into a Protection token as effect from the Sunfall card. We have a Map token, Protection Might from Mirex, Samurai token from the Wandering Emperor, and Spirit token, which can also be produced by the effect of this card, the Phantom Interference. So I guess that's pretty much it, guys. I think I'll wrap this up by wishing Mr. Yuta Takahashi good luck in the top 8 matchups later on, which will happen. And we could be stream live on Twitch/Magic, and also check on the MTG Melee websites for the other updates. And you can also check those decks that are also posted there. So I guess that's pretty much it for this standard deck tech of Azorius Control by Yuta Takahashi. Do like and subscribe, notifications on, and see you guys.